I don't know how many of you had a show that you really remember very fondly growing up in your teenage years. I think depending on what generation you are, I don't know. For some of you, it might be Happy Days. For Clay, it's probably MASH, because he was a teenager when MASH was airing. And
your insistence, by the way, based on 3 years of difference. Am I the same age as your older brother?
Yeah, you're the same age as my older brother. But what I think is great though is when people are just like, "Hey, you got to lay off Clay." Like, so he's a little bit older.
We were out to dinner the other day. People don't realize this, and they were like, somehow our ages came up, and they said, "Buck, you look really young for your age," which implies to me that I look super old for my age too.
I gotta tell you,
and we're 3 years apart.
Clay and I could have been on the same high school athletics team. He could have been hazing me.
That's a good point.
In the locker room.
You'd have been a freshman when I was a senior.
Yep. We could have been on the same high school team. But I love this joke because occasionally people kind of miss the joke and they're just like, "Hey, lay off." Clay's. It's like Clay's. Anyway,
you haven't been through the war of 3 kids yet.
Yeah,
they'll age you. They will age you.
I
mean, the lack of sleep for about 20 straight years, or whatever it is, 16 straight years of having kids.
Now that we're all grown up, my mom who had 4, she always says she if she could go back, she would have 8. I'm always like, well, is that because the 4 have all grown up and you're now in grandma mode? So it's.
I would keep having them. We have. Katie, who you've met, has been with us for almost 9 years now. And initially, she was in charge of taking care of all the kids, Buck. Now she's kind of in charge of me, and she's having a baby. And so I feel like we're having another baby coming into the household, and I'm excited about it because I would keep having. So I'm encouraging you and Carrie, however many kids you want, add 1.
Yeah, and one day I'll tell stories of I actually had an English nanny growing up, and she would walk around and she would just... She would get furious. She'd be like, "Did you take my keys? Did we take her keys?" And she always had them on a little necklace around her neck, but we could never get her. She always thought I was like 5. I'm like, "I didn't take your keys, lady. I swear." Anyway, she was very Mrs. Doubtfire. Oh, actually, Mrs. Doubtfire. We look at this differently now. The whole Mrs. Doubtfire situation. One of the biggest movies of the '90s. Actually, you know that?
Oh, it would be totally unacceptable. Although I made that argument, and then people said, Medea might be the one that protects Mrs. Doubtfire because
if you cancel
Tyler
Mrs. Doubtfire,
Perry.
you have to cancel Medea. So how we got on this, other than the silly stuff, it was I remember I grew up, and the shows that had the most impact on my formative teenage years would be Beverly Hills 90210. Maybe this explains a lot of my worldview, and Saved by the Bell, right? So Beverly Hills 90210 and say both set in California, which is interesting to me now. What I always say, I grew up thinking California was the promised land that I would move to someday when I was older. But for a lot of people, it was Dawson's Creek, which I watched a little bit of. And this is what got me thinking about this. How many of you remember the show Dawson's Creek? Guys and girls, I liked it too. 45 and under, I think, would be probably Dawson's Creek, from, I don't know what the age limit would be. Point being, James Van Der Beek, who played Dawson in Dawson's Creek. I haven't seen him in public in a very long time. I don't know what the guy's been up to. Hopefully he's doing great, selling insurance out in Scottsdale or something. I have no idea what he's doing. But here he is pointing out that the DNC is just in this all-out shutdown mode. He says no debate, no democracy. And that's an interesting point. Play 8.
And I cannot get over the fact that the Democratic National Committee is saying there will not be a debate to decide the nominee for president. Are you kidding me? There's no debate. There's no debate over an 80-year-old man who, if he lives, will be the oldest sitting president in the history of the country. And if he doesn't live, has a vice president whose approval rating is worse than his. This guy is obviously declining mental faculties. You're putting him up in front of a podium with flashcards telling him who to call on and what the questions are going to be. And you're telling us there's no debate? We need a debate. How do we have a government? How do we have a democracy if we're letting a small little back room of people make all the important decisions for us? That's not a democracy, and it doesn't work because y'all have been wrong about a lot these last couple of years in that back room. No debate, no democracy.
Dawson's Creek for the win, Clay. Pointing something out here. Democrats aren't allowed to even talk about the fact that Biden's so old it's preposterous.
I talked about this on Fox News, and I never would have believed that this would be the case, that we would be reacting to James Van Der Beek, a.k.a. Dawson Leary, a.k.a. Varsity Blues Johnny Moxon, one of the all-time great high school sports movies. High school movies, maybe, period. He was phenomenal in that as a Texas high school quarterback legend. But, Buck, he also said Biden's got dementia as a part of this. And it's fascinating to me that Dawson Leary, James Van Der Beek, is more insightful on the DNC process than anyone on MSNBC or CNN has been so far throughout the primary season.
Isn't basic honesty a fascinating thing when it's been swept away for so long? There's not a single Democrat who could make a case that Joe Biden is not beyond the senior moments that would raise questions about this. Not a single one.
Yeah.
And yet they all go along with this. It really does feel like a mass formation or mass formation psychosis. It feels like everybody on the Democrat side has to go along with this craziness that they don't believe in.